Welcome to the 2021 Public Service Career Expo. My name is Kelly and I will be your moderator today for the Public Works session. I am a human resources recruiter for the city of Shawnee, Kansas. And what that means is that my job is to recruit individuals who would be a good fit for my organization to work in a number of different jobs, some of which you'll get to hear about here shortly. So in order to do this, I post jobs online, I go to career fairs and come up with different ideas that will help make my city stand out as a place that someone would want to come work. We are so glad that you have chosen to join us to learn about one of the many exciting career areas in the public sector, and that's public works. If you have not already done so, please have your teacher or whomever is logged into this program write your school's name and the number of students in your classroom in the chat box. And this will allow us to have a record of who's joining us today. You can also have them type any pressing questions that you all may have after watching that awesome video into the chat box as well. We will be doing a question and answer session for the majority of our time spent together, so we'll have plenty of time to address your questions during this session. Next up, we'll go ahead and introduce you to a few of the individuals who are joining us live today. You'll remember two of these individuals from the video, and we are pleased to have two additional individuals with us today for the slide session. So please join me in welcoming Lauren Snyder, City Engineer for the City of Shawnee, Chuck Walston, Supervisor for the City of Shawnee, Brad Ebbinger, Microbiologist with Water One, and David Saltz Utility Foreman with Water One. I'm going to have each of these individuals introduce themselves a little bit more and share a few tidbits about where they work, how long they've been there, and what it is that they do every day. So Lauren, would you go ahead and start us off?
Sure. My name is Lauren Snyder. I'm the city engineer for the city of Shawnee, Kansas. This year I'm entering my 20th year or 21st year of my career. Been here with the city of Shawnee for the past 3 years. I chose to go into public works and public service because I enjoy, helping people out and serving people.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Chuck, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Chuck Walston with the City of Shawnee as well in the Public Works Department. I'm the Stormwater Coordinator. I oversee 3 crews that are involved in stormwater maintenance here in the city. I'm also involved in the snow removal operations as one of the snow managers during the 12-hour shifts that we put on during snow removal. Been here with the City of Shawnee for 30 years. Like Lauren, I like service. I like to serve the public and solve problems for folks. And that's what led me to public service.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck. Brad, you want to introduce yourself next?
Hello, my name is Brad Ebbinger, and I'm a microbiologist at Water One. Water One's the water district for Johnson County, and I have been here for 8 years. I actually started my career here at Water One as a plant operator. So what I was doing was producing the water from the water source to your tap. I was part of the team that helped treat the water and make sure it was clean and safe. And now as a microbiologist, I am testing the water as it leaves, heading to your tap or to your water fountain that you might be using at school. And what I'll do is we're making sure that there's no bacteria or viruses or anything growing in the water before you drink it.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. And last but not least, David.
Hi there. I'm Dave Saltz. I'm a utility foreman for Water One. I work in construction maintenance. I do everything from install new mains to fix water main breaks, repair valves, fire hydrants, and work on what we call transmission mains, which are the large diameter mains, 30-inch mains. We've got some mains that you can almost walk through. We do a little bit of everything, and anything that we need to maintain and repair.
Awesome. Thank you, David, and thank you to all of our panelists for introducing yourselves. So students, you may have noticed that we talked a little bit about agilities in the video. Agilities are defined as your personal strengths and interests as they relate to careers. Identifying where your agilities are can help you think about a career that you might like to pursue in the future. Two of the most common agilities for public works careers are inspecting and operating objects. We're going to turn it back over to our panelists to tell us a little bit about what that looks like on a day-to-day basis in their jobs. So David, do you want to start us off?
Sure. When I get to work in the morning, I've got a basic plan, but one thing that I have to be is flexible. I don't know if there's been a main break overnight or something like that, and we may have to go at the drop of a hat and leave one job for more of an emergency. We also operate heavy equipment, backhoes, track hose, dump trucks. Everybody in our department has a CDL, and yeah, we just got to be quick on our feet and ready to go to the next task. And that's one of the things I enjoy about my job.
Awesome. And Brad, I imagine in your job, inspecting is a huge component of that as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that looks like in your job?
Yeah, so every day, part of my job is to inspect the water to make sure that it's not going to make anybody sick when they drink it. So like David, we have to be really flexible. We have tests that we're going to run every day, no matter what, to inspect that water. But our group here works a lot with David's group, because if there is a big main break or a new installation, a lot of tests have to be run on that main before they can use it again to make sure that there's nothing growing in it. And then as far as operating objects go, you can see some of the equipment behind me. We're using microscopes, big beakers, a lot of different test equipment, so we can identify those bacteria and viruses that are in the water, because you can't see them with the human eye.
Awesome, thank you. And Chuck, speaking of operating objects, I imagine that's a huge portion of your job with snow removal and operating equipment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. In our day-to-day operations, we have the same kind of equipment that David has. We have backhoes, excavators, and loaders. And obviously, you can see over my right shoulder here, that's one of our tandem snowplows that we use to push snow off and treat icy conditions in the roadways during the winter, which is something we're kind of gearing up for here in the next couple of weeks. Like David, we've got to be flexible and ready to go at the drop of a hat. As far as investigating, we get our work lined out in the morning. We'll arrive on site, and then we'll kind of piece together from the instructions or what the problem was, and then the instructions we were given as to what needed to be done, and then we'll figure out the best way to solve the problem there.
Great, thanks, Chuck. All right, students, you've seen a sneak peek into their working world, so now it's your turn. We're going to go ahead and move into the question and answer portion of our time together. So please use the chat box to type questions you may have, and we will work through answering as many of those as we can. So many people, in fact, all of us live within a city, but some of these students may not be as familiar about what Water One is. So Brad, do you want to talk to the students a little bit about Water One and what that entails?
Of course. So Water One is the water district for Johnson County. So we provide drinking water or tap water to about 430,000 people that we serve. So before I was a microbiologist, I worked at the treatment plant where I was part of the team that over the course of a year, we would produce 22 billion gallons of water. And all year long. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, to meet the demands of the population of Johnson County. And all year long, we meet those demands, and it's safe to drink and tastes good to drink all year long.
That's awesome. We're certainly thankful for the work that you do, for sure. So Brad maybe touched on this a little bit, but I imagine within Public Works that safety is incredibly important in all of the jobs that you all do. Chuck, how important is safety on the job, and what are some things that you guys do there at the city to help keep your employees safe?
Well, absolutely. Safety is the number one priority of any job, and really, we just kind of look out for one another. We make sure that we're wearing the proper protective equipment, or PPE. I'm sure everybody's driven by a job site where we've been out on the road, and you've seen us all wearing the big orange vests that help us to be seen a little bit better. We work inside. We have traffic control devices, the cones, the big barrels, all kinds of things like that. As far as the rest of the gear, of course, we have gloves and steel-toed boots and everything we need for protection of ourselves. And then we have some other keen stuff we use when we go down inside some of our pipes. We'll use little tripod things and with little winch cables and harnesses that raise and lower us into them, and air monitors to check and confirm that all the air inside these things is safe and breathable and isn't going to cause harm to anything. And you just never know what's going to be found under the ground. And as far as excavation goes, we've got big boxes we put in the ground to make sure that they don't cave in on us, or hope that it doesn't cave in on us. And if it does, it kind of keeps us shielded. Various things like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chuck. And Brad, I imagine safety is incredibly important in your role too, but probably looks a little bit different. Talk to us about safety procedures and equipment you guys use within the lab.
Yeah, so in the lab, we're confined to our lab space, so we're not worried about traffic or anything, but we're working with different chemicals and acids that could burn us or splash on our face or let off gas, so stuff that'll be harmful to breathe. So we always wear a lab coat so we don't spill anything on our clothes, because some of the stuff can be corrosive and could burn a hole in our clothes. We work with a lot of different glassware, like the beaker right here behind me. A big concern is if, it does happen from time to time where it gets dropped and then you have glass everywhere. So we want to make sure, we don't handle that incorrectly, because you don't want to get cut or anything. And then another big one is going to be our fume hoods. So it's a large cabinet that we'll actually put our arms into, and the rest of our body is outside of it. So when we're working with these chemicals, we're isolated away from any type of gases that could come off during the test. That way we don't have to worry about breathing that and harming our throat, our eyes, our lungs, or anything like that.
Very cool. We're thankful you guys stay safe in that tough work. So Lauren, let's turn it over to you. You mentioned in the video that one of your favorite parts of the job is being able to see a project from start to completion. So how long does a project typically take to get through that full cycle?
Well, typically a project will begin its life cycle around this time of the year in the fall, when we're finishing up our construction for the year prior. We'll go through and we'll begin planning ahead. The city usually dedicates funds for projects that are targeted for development at the point. So we'll go through and start putting together plans for those projects. Putting a plan for a project can take anywhere between 2 and maybe 6 months. Sometimes depends on the size of the project. And then after we have the plans, we have to go out and get pricing, or do what we call bidding. We take it out to the people that build the projects and get their pricing. Then we award a contract, and then we go into construction. That whole cycle we like to have happen within 1 year. However, some projects are larger than that and can take 2 to 3 years sometimes. For instance, right now the city is doing a couple of fire station renovations. Those projects will take about 24 months. On the other hand, we have some small street projects, which the construction period is only 60 days. So it really depends on what the project is. But really, to think about a project holistically, it's not just the construction you see in the field. There's a lot that happens before it ever goes to the field. And there's some stuff that happens after the project's completely closed out, all paperwork that it takes to get a project completed.
That's really interesting. I imagine a number of our students probably think of an engineering job as more administrative than, say, what Chuck and Dave do, but it sounds like you definitely spend a lot of time out in the field as well. David, what would you say is your favorite or the most exciting part of your job?
Well, personally, one of my favorite things is fixing main breaks. It's not it's one of the few times people are glad to see you come tear up their yard when they've got a water main leaking in their yard. You know, and then I work with, you know, cities like Shawnee. We do main relocations and stuff like that for their new projects where they might be improving storm sewer and a water main's in the way or something like that. Them are kind of my favorite things to do because they're short jobs and you get to bounce around and see different parts of the county and not be in the same spot all the time.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point too. You're not just working with your peers there at Water One, you're working with the other cities and you're working with the citizens. And Chuck, I know that's something that you all do in your job as well. Tell us a little bit about your work directly with the citizens and the folks who live in Shawnee. And I know sometimes they're happy to see you, sometimes they're less happy to see you. And maybe tell us a little bit about other folks that you work with outside of your other public works staff that maybe our students wouldn't expect.
Sure, we do a lot of work with a lot of the other utilities, like David said. Often we come in to improve a system that might have been undersized and now we need to be bigger. So we have to have the utilities move, the water lines, gas lines, electric company, you know, the telecommunication pretty much for stormwater keeps us in business. They've, with their big underground boring, they'll strike our pipes once in a while. We have to work with them to get our systems repaired. I'm sure that Dave runs into the same problem. That's where some of their breaks come from, I'm sure. Dealing with the citizens, it's a pretty good variety. We'll have everything from, boy, we're happy to see you, to what in the world are you doing, to you know, get off my lawn. So it's always exciting, and there's never a dull moment, that's for sure, in the public works. But for the most part, most people are really happy to see us coming, especially in the wintertime. They love it when we come by and plow their road. They hate it when we come by and plow their road because, well, we put those nice little snow windrows into their driveway and they've got to reshovel those back out again. But all in all, it's a good relationship with all the other utilities and the citizens.
Yeah, as much fun as you guys have in those exciting parts, it definitely comes with some challenges too. Brad, what would you say is the hardest part or the most challenging part of what you do every day?
Oh, that's a good one. It's also a really hard question. I kind of have to go back to what David said earlier, is you just have to be really flexible. And I kind of expect the unexpected, but like you kind of get in your routine of you run these tests every day, and then, you know, every now and then we'll get a call from David and say, hey, we had a large main break last night. We do need a sample pulled, and we'll go out there and grab a sample. And, you know, none of this stuff is fast because we have to give enough time for any type of bacteria or viruses to grow. So kind of going with what David and Chuck said, you're working with the public, and, you know, sometimes it's an inconvenience to have the equipment out there, but we have to make sure it's safe and the water's safe before we can turn everything back on. And it's just that, yeah, expect the unexpected. That's probably the hardest part.
Completely understand that. Lauren, what about for you? Anything different than these guys have said as far as the most challenging aspects of the work that you do?
You know, some of the most challenging things are, I mean, the city of Shawnee, we're 62.5 square miles of real estate. We've got 67,000 folks that we're serving. There's a lot of, you can imagine someone juggling a bunch of balls in the air. One of the challenges, to serving this many people is you got to have the ability to multitask and keep a lot of balls in the air at the same time. So part of the expectation that the public has for us is, if we happen to drop one of those balls, we got to pick it up as soon as we can and keep the city functioning and safe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. So many of our students are probably thinking about next steps, whether that's college or to get right into the career field. So Chuck, let's start with you. What type of education or training is necessary to do a role similar to yours?
Well, that's a very good question. Usually, a good college education in construction administration is not a bad thing to have. I do not have that. I just kind of came up through the ranks, school of hard knocks, if you will. You just have to have a willingness to be able to pay attention, learn from your mentors, and learn from your peers. Everything is a new thing every day. Everybody's learning something new every day in this field. You can go to school and you can have all the knowledge that you need to know, but out in the field, things are not always the way they are in a book. And you just got to be able to think on your feet. It's an exciting, never the same thing twice.
Absolutely. And Brad, what about you? If one of our students was interested in becoming a microbiologist, what type of education and training does that entail?
So my background is fisheries and wildlife sciences. So I studied a lot of water quality, river, lake, reservoirs, all that. So when I started at Water One, I was not familiar with water treatment, but environmental water quality was my background. So kind of go along with Chuck said, like, I have schooling and everything in a science-related degree, but then you never really stop learning because there's always something new, especially with the water industry. Regulations are always changing from the EPA, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. There's always new test methods that are being approved. So you're learning constantly, you're reading constantly. So in that science background, in the science field.
Awesome, thanks. And Lauren, what about to become an engineer? What education and training does that entail?
Well, to become an engineer, you're going to be looking most likely at about 4 or 5 years of college education after high school. And then beyond that, a professional engineer has to do something sort of like what a doctor does, which is a 4-year practice or residency before they're eligible to take the professional engineer's exam. Once you take that exam, you're able to sign off on designs and drawings. You might think of that as the same thing as a doctor, signing off on a prescription. Engineers have to sign off on the drawings and things, and engineers are also held liable or legally responsible for the drawings and plans that they put together. So if you design a bridge or something that would happen to fail, comes back to the engineer who designed it. So a little bit of responsibility that goes with it, a little bit of practice that has to go with it. If you're thinking of becoming, an engineer, that type of thing, I'd highly encourage you, before you start into school or around when you begin, to consider doing an internship or something like that, where you can spend some time in a summer, working alongside a professional and seeing what it's all about. Early in my career, that's why I did a 2-year cooperative education situation with a Department of Transportation. And by the time I finished, I was really certain that I was going to go down the right path into engineering. So it was a paid internship that can fund your education as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Career Expo has done an awesome job here at the end of today's session. There will be a link to all of the internship and kind of job shadowing opportunities that are available to students to kind of get out there, see what groups have to offer. I know very well as a recruiter how difficult it can be to fill these full-time positions with the right people. So getting exposure on the front end is definitely important. So David, with hiring, being as tricky as it is today, what are some traits that you would look for in a coworker or someone that you would be working alongside?
Well, I would like to. I like to see somebody who is self-motivated and wants to learn in our particular profession or whatever you want to call it. Being mechanically inclined is very important too. If you like working on cars or taking things apart, I mean, that's the kind of work we do every day. Today we're rebuilding a 16-inch pressure reducing valve. We've got to take it all apart and put all new parts in it and put it back together. And I'll be headed straight back over there after we're done here today.
Awesome. And Brad, what about you? What are some traits that you would look for in a future peer or somebody that you would be working alongside with?
I think attention to detail is going to be huge. We deal with a lot of data every day, a lot of documentation on what we're testing for, what our test results are for. And as part of what we do, there's always a peer review process after that. And so if my colleague runs a test, enters in her results, I peer review after that, and then my supervisor peer reviews my peer review, so that way we know everything is correct going forward, because we don't want to misrepresent the test or enter in the wrong information. And then as part of that attention to detail, also, the EPA in the state of Kansas, they're always updating their rules. And every time they are wanting to do an update, there's going to be a public comment section. So I'll go in and read what the new updated regulation is going to be. My colleague's doing the same thing, and we'll kind of pick it apart together. She'll be like, did you see this? Or did you see this? Like, what do you think? And we'll make comments about, whether it's good or bad, and then the state or the EPA, they'll compile all those and they'll eventually kind of have a response back. So it gives us an edge on to know what's coming down the pipeline for new regulations.
Great. Just more folks that you guys touch on a regular basis. You work with a lot of different people. And I'm going to go back to Chuck. So we saw in the video that you guys operate a lot of different heavy equipment. What kind of training is needed before you begin operating those heavy equipment? And is that something students would need to do in advance, or is that something an employer would offer?
Good question. Actually, the first thing we start everybody out on, some people think it's funny, some people don't, but I generally will ask people for equipment operators and truck drivers, and the first thing I'll hand them is a shovel and a wheelbarrow. As soon as you can proficiently operate a shovel and the wheelbarrow, we'll start looking at putting you in the motorized equipment. Most of it is basically learned on the trade. There are schools in which you can go and learn how to operate the equipment, but you definitely, when you enter into the field as a laborer, if you're open-minded, you're paying attention to the job and your surroundings, and you can watch that equipment operated, especially if you got really good operators showing or demonstrating, you can pick up a lot of tricks of the trade and become a very proficient operator yourself just by on-the-job learning more or less with the equipment. And that's what makes this so much fun is the ability to pass on, anyway for me, has always been my ability to pass on my knowledge and skills, and then watch people take what I've taught them, their peers have taught them, and become their own individual operator and become really good at the job.
Awesome. David, does that work the same out there at Water One? Do you need to have any prior training on the equipment that you all utilize, or do you train your employees as well?
Typically, we start as a laborer, just like with Chuck, and I'm continually watching my laborers, see if they're paying attention. You want somebody who's aware of their surroundings, not getting in the way of the current operator, somebody that knows what's going on the construction site before you start giving them a chance to start learning how to run that equipment. We have a dump site. If we've got a slow day, some of the laborers get on machines and they'll go up there and practice digging. I started out as a laborer. I made operator after about 2 years, and then I was a lead man for 4 or 5 years, and now I'm a foreman. So.
Awesome. You bring up a good point about career advancement and different opportunities that are available. So Lauren, I imagine you didn't get to come right out of school and become the city engineer. What kind of career path could a student expect to get to a role such as yours?
I wouldn't consider myself a traditional career path. Coming out of school, I did not go to college right away. In fact, I just went and started working construction. I knew that I liked to work outside and I like to build stuff. So I spent my first year out of high school tying rebar in the trenches. And it took me a little while to figure out that engineering was what I wanted to do. I actually thought that I wanted to be a mechanical engineer at one point. And I started doing school for that and realized that I didn't want to be inside a plant, that I really wanted to be outdoors. So I ended up switching out to civil engineering and then eventually construction engineering. Along the way, I mean, a lot of the jobs that you do while you're going to school, which might be working as a construction laborer, the internships and all those things, all contribute to your eventual career path. Once I knew after I did my internship and co-op that I was on the right path, it was easy for me to finish up at that point. So, all your experience that you have, I've spent time on the big yellow equipment. I've spent time in the field, shoveling dirt. All that stuff, all just helps you as you get further along the career field to be able to relate to other folks. They're doing different things.
Great. And Chuck, what about you as a supervisor? You've been with the city for a long time. What type of a path could someone expect to work or experience that they could get ahead of time before getting into a supervisory role?
Well, pretty much like David and Lauren, we all start on the ground floor. I started out as a laborer, laying pipe in a ditch and rocking and graveling and using that shovel, as I said before. Worked my way up. When I got hired into the city, I started out a little bit higher than a laborer because of my previous construction experience. But I came in as what we called a truck driver laborer. I drove the dump truck to haul the materials and worked on the job site, still doing the looping and shoveling like everybody else did. Worked my way up to foreman, supervisor, crew supervisor, and then I skipped the equipment operator stage there, didn't I, before I got to foreman. Then went to supervisor, and then about 5 years ago was promoted into the coordinator position where I manage or I oversee the 3 stormwater crews doing that operation. And the career path it's an easy path to do. You don't have to have, like I said before, don't have to have a great deal of education because you're going to continue to learn. Not that it's not a bad idea to go get the education, but everybody's going to start at the bottom and work their way up through it.
Awesome. All right, we've got time for, I think, one more question, and we'll start with Brad. If you were to give a piece of advice to yourself when you were the age of our audience here today, people trying to figure out the best career field for them and what they want to do, what piece of advice would you give?
Oh, I would say don't tell yourself that you can't do something or that you don't want to do something. I know when I graduated high school, I said I did not want to do science anymore. And then when I was in college, it was actually I had a gen ed science class that was like plant identification. And I really enjoyed it. I liked the outdoors. I liked kind of knowing how the natural world worked around me. And then next thing I know, every one of my classes is a science-based class. And then that's what I'm doing every day now. And I love it. So don't write anything off, and don't tell yourself you can't do something, because you can.
Awesome. And David, what about you? One piece of advice for our audience today?
I would say, like Lauren mentioned, get a summer internship. That's how I started at Water One. I started just a week or two after my 18th birthday as summer intern while I was actually going to school to be an engineer. After 3 summers of doing that, I decided I enjoyed this work, and it's a rewarding work, and I'm glad I made the decisions I did. So.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And thank you to all of our presenters. We really appreciate your time spent with this question and answer session. Students, if this career area has sparked your interest, we want to end by letting you know some of the opportunities designed just for you, where you can explore public works careers in person. We would love to see you take advantage of these opportunities. So if you think a career in public works might be right for you, you can go to the website at www.careerexpokc.org to learn more about how you can find an internship or volunteer or job shadow opportunity like our panel spoke about today, and how you can get involved. I want to thank you all for your time, and have a great rest of your day.